Hey guys, so this is a new video series I'm trying. So it's gonna be less of a tutorial but more of a traditional devlog of my currently ongoing indie game project. So I've been working for the past month or a little more on a 2D Metroidvania kind of game. And yeah, due to circumstances, I got to work more intensely the previous 2 weeks. And I just thought I'll take this opportunity and show you a little bit of my development process and also to keep you up to date on my game's progress. So yeah, I'll just show you what the game is about and what I've achieved in this past month. In a nutshell, the game will be a Metroidvania that is set in a mountain area. A big focus on the game will be on exploration, on the typical Metroidvania formula, so you progress, you gain different abilities and mechanics that let you access areas that were previously inaccessible. Arguably, the character is one of the most important aspects of any 2D platformer, so I started creating the character. Especially I started creating the character controller and tried to make it feel awesome from the start on. So this is pretty important because if you come to a point where like designing your levels and so on, then it's really important to already know how your character will be able to move and so on and how it feels. Otherwise you might have to redesign completely whole portions of your levels in a later stage when you start to tweak the, for instance, jump height of your character and so on. So yeah, I really tried to get this as early as possible. As far as visuals, I stuck with my vector art style, which I've grown quite accustomed to now. Doing everything in Inkscape. It is a pretty flat and simplistic style. One of the main reasons I actually chose it is because I'm technically rather skilled in doing it and I can do it pretty fast. It's also pretty easy to animate. I'll show the animation part later on. It's one of the main reasons I chose this style over traditional like drawing based styles. In order to fit in with the mountain theme of my game, I decided to make movement kind of realistic. Obviously not really realistic, but in a sense that it's like based on real-world climbing a little bit. This mainly means that I didn't want to include moves like dash or double jump or something like that is basically impossible to do. Rather, I tried to include abilities that are more like tools that you gather, like for instance an ice pick that lets you clutch and climb the walls, or a grappling hook, or different things that are based on actual real-world stuff. One of the signature moves in my game is the rope mechanic or the grappling hook. So it's a really flexible rope which you can shoot on almost any solid object in the game, and you can like swing around, pull and so on, and use it to cross really big gorges and climb really high ledges and so on. And you get it later on in the game, but once you get it, it really enables very swift movement. So once I was satisfied with how the character felt, once I had all the basic mechanics going, I moved on for now. So when I was initially brainstorming for a theme, I really considered what are the viable areas that work in a 2D platformer and especially in a 2D Metroidvania. So a really important aspect I think is a vertical expanse or like elevation, because in a 2D platformer you essentially work on two axes, on the X and on the Y axis, and if you have like areas that are really flat, like for instance a desert area, there's not that much elevation usually, so you end up losing an entire dimension basically. So that's why a lot of, especially Metroidvanias, use, for instance, caves as their theme, because in a cave you have this natural vertical expanse and also horizontal in all directions. I decided to choose the other direction, to go with a mountain area, where you have like a huge mountain massive and a summit on top, which is like reserved for the late game area and so on. So besides that, there wasn't really a structured way I used for world building. I really just put all of it that came to my mind into kind of early draft for a map, and I just also used a kind of hybrid approach between pen and paper drawings and digital illustrations. So basically I started outlining a lot of the level design also already on paper. I don't know if I'll continue, since basically in Unity, using the tile maps, you can also prototype really fast. So you don't really lose much time, but you already get a playable version. While my plan is not to go Hollow Knight style crazy with lore and background information, background story and so on, I still think it's quite good to have a bit of backstory, at least in your head. Even if it's not directly told in the game or part of the main story, it's still important because it helps you to find ideas in all other areas as well, like gameplay, environment and so on. I decided early on to write a little bit of lore, the people that live in this area, and a little bit of history also. So basically I started thinking about different kind of peoples that live in this area. Some of them are natives of this land and live there forever, and some of them have basically invaded it or have come here as refugees and so on. So two of the main peoples are the Emerald and the Sapphire people. These two are also the most maybe human-like of the peoples. The Emeralds are kind of the good humans, I guess, so they have a rich history, they are quite refined, and they have tried to live with nature and cooperate with all the existing tribes on the mountain. And their focus is more on like exploration, learning, and alchemy and so on. And then there's the Sapphire people, which are kind of the opposites. They're more the warfaring people. They actually invaded the lands and kind of exploited it, so they are basically kind of the bad humans, I guess. However, they are at the same time also like eager builders and have done a lot to build infrastructure on the mountain and so on. So you will see later on what that will mean. So yeah, these are like two polar opposites kind of, and they have also quite a bit of history together as enemies, but also as partners and so on. In game development, I always try to make prototypes very early on, also very early on, containing a basic version of pretty much everything, including UI, sound effects, visual effects, and so on. So I really like to do this iterative process. So as a software engineer, this iterative process comes naturally, probably, but I think it's definitely applicable for every other area as well, for the entire game development process essentially. And Unity obviously helps you very much in this. It's great for rapid prototyping and iteration. Also, I really like the tile map approach I've used. The tile maps really allow you to prototype your level design very quickly. I've also used automatic rule tiles from Unity's 2D extras, which further enhances your productivity and make your prototyped levels look kind of decent right away. Animation is definitely one of my weaknesses, I would say, but I'm trying to improve. So skeletal animation from Unity's 2D tools helps me a lot in that. It basically allows you to rig your character just like you would in 3D, and then animate them based on those bones and so on. So it's really more of the 3D way to animate, in contrast to maybe traditional 2D frame-based animations. Lighting is another area which is much easier now with the new 2D tools. So before, there was actually no really good way to have lighting, especially dynamic lighting in 2D, so you essentially had to bake in the lighting in your graphics. But now with the new 2D lighting suite, there is a huge selection of different lights that you can just use exactly like 3D lights, and they are much more performant and have unique properties that are suited for 2D environments. I'm a passionate musician playing the piano for many years now, and it's basically, besides game development, my biggest hobby. So one of my favorite things in game development is actually composing game music, the game soundtracks. I've been using Fruity Loops, FL Studio for the most time, and I like to do an iterative approach in composition as well, actually. So I try to get some quick and dirty first versions of all of the tracks as soon as possible. It helps me not only to improve the soundtrack later on, but also to have a better feeling for the other parts of the game. Alright, so this was my first devlog covering about the last month of progress on my indie game. I hope you liked this video format, and if you do, make sure to subscribe, and I'll keep on updating more regularly in the upcoming weeks. So I'll try to do a little video update, I guess at least once every 2 weeks, or maybe even every week, depending on how much progress I'm doing. Yeah, so until next time, hope you have a great time and see you.